Hello, outlets! Welcome to another fantastic and fabulous episode of Shameless Plugs Podcast.
Well, it is hosted by the two greatest writers in the history of mankind, so how could it not be fantastic?
This is true, and those would be J.A. George to my right.
Yes. Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
It may not be morning for you. It's morning for us.
It's definitely morning. And Samantha the writer, right here,
Yes.
sitting in the studio.
And I call us the two greatest writers in the history of writing, in the history of mankind, whatever I said. It's all true. I called us that because the whole purpose of this podcast is reading, writing, and relentless self-promotion.
Relentless
So
self-promotion.
if we're going to relentlessly promote ourselves, we might as well go all the way and just call ourselves the greatest of all time.
I mean,
That's what I think.
my name is The Writer.
Mm-hmm.
It is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
My website, my Twitter handle,
Mm-hmm.
J.A. George Writing. See, it's part of my name.
Yeah, it's part of his name.
part of
It
my
is. It's part of his name.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good.
Writing is right there.
Writing.
Anyway,
Writing.
yeah, writing.
Writing.
Yep.
So we are here once again for episode 6.
Episode 6, yep.
We are on episode 6
Mm-hmm.
of Shameless Plugs Podcast. Hopefully you've listened to them all. If you haven't, you should go back and listen to them all.
Yes. We would appreciate that.
Yeah, we would. We would.
And we would appreciate talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely,
Seriously.
please.
We would love to interact with our listeners. So.
Yeah, reach out. So, yeah, I guess this is, like I said, episode 6, a good time to kind of talk about what the point of this podcast is, which is relentless self-promotion.
Yes.
We are both writers. We are both trying to get our names and our work out into the world. And part of our platform is this delightful podcast where
Yes.
we discuss with you and each other the ins and outs of writing, our opinions on those ins and outs, and things that we enjoy. Throwback to last week, 2 weeks ago,
Last episode. Yeah.
our Harry Potter episode. You guys should listen to it if you haven't yet.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not a Harry Potter fan, listen to it anyway.
Samantha's not a Harry Potter fan.
Nope. So, but anyway, this episode is going to be NaNoWriMo Now What?
Yeah. Or as I call it, the shorter version, Nano Now What?
Nano Now What? So you have survived NaNoWriMo, which
Congratulations.
is, yay! Which is, National
Novel Writing Month. And you should be proud of that. Seriously, you should. If you got through the month and you kept working, I don't care if you got 50,000 words like the challenge dictates or whatever you want to call it. I don't care if you did that. I don't care if you wrote 20 words. If you worked on your novel for a month, whether it's your first novel or your 50th, you should be proud of yourselves.
You should be
and
very
we are
We
proud of you.
are very proud of you.
And we congratulate you.
Congratulations,
All seriousness.
writers.
All seriousness, it's a great thing if you sat down and you worked and you applied yourself for a month or 15 days or whatever you did.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you did, if you were working hard, you deserve praise.
Absolutely. If NaNoWriMo inspired you to come up with an idea, if it got you thinking about writing again, if it increased your accountability for writing,
Yes.
all of those are great things.
Yes.
But
Yes.
now the month is over.
Yes. How do you keep plugging forward? Plugging forward. How do you keep that momentum? How do you keep that motivation? How do you...
Puns are awesome.
Yes. How do you keep going with writing? How do you stay motivated? That's what we wanted to talk about today.
The other thing we wanted to talk about today is how our own NaNoWriMos went.
Yes. Do you want to do that first? Do you want to talk about how our months went first?
Yeah, that's cool. We can do that first.
Because, there's kind of... I think this would be motivational for listeners, even though...
I think so.
I don't think either of us followed the traditional format of
Nope.
NaNoWriMo.
Nope.
Neither of us did. But I think that could actually be helpful for listeners, especially if you listen to our 4th episode, the one, the actual NaNoWriMo episode that we posted at the beginning of November, at the beginning of the month. I think this fits directly in with what we were talking about there. So
Yeah, absolutely it does.
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I can go.
Okay. So how was your NaNoWriMo?
It was fine. So I have to really take a pantser look at NaNoWriMo, and I'm going to do another throwback to episode 2, where we talked about the difference between pantsers and plotters. The basic difference is pantsers go for it, plotters plot. So...
Yeah, we prepare.
Yeah. Or prepare.
Yeah.
Or plot. Or, Either way.
Synonyms. Anyway. Somewhat.
Ooh, big
Somewhat.
word early in the morning.
I'm a writer, so...
Big words! So, yeah, my NaNoWriMo went well. My goal for myself this month was to just spend some time with my novels. So as a pantser, I view it as get to the computer, write, work with my characters, be with my characters, and I think I did that well. I wrote myself into a crossroads. Usually you hear wrote yourself into a corner, but I wrote myself into crossroads, which is really positive because I had like 7 directions that I could go, so I spent some time exploring each one of those, seeing which one fit with the heart of my characters, where they wanted to go. They wanted to go in some strange places, but pulled it back. I had to do a little rewrite this month, and yeah, so I don't know how many words I actually wrote, but directionally I refocused and I'm moving forward.
So I want to highlight something that I think is important about what you were just talking about. You were not working on a new novel.
No.
You were working on one that you were already had been writing.
This is true.
So I think that's an important point for our listeners, and, this might be a little late since it's after the fact, but I think that's perfectly keeping in spirit with the month. You don't have to start a new novel. I know that kind of the original conversation around it, or on the official site, I believe, they talk about starting a novel. I don't feel like you have to start a novel. It could be one that you were already working on.
Well, and I think there's the spirit of this for me has always been they're starting a novel, and then the next day they're starting a novel, and then the next day they're starting a novel. I mean, it's always the same thing that I'm working on, but each day is a new start to that, and that's definitely
That's because you're a pantser.
Pantser philosophy.
That is
right
because
there.
you're a pantser.
Every time I get on my computer, I'm working with the same characters, I'm working with the same story, but it's I'm starting every day.
The Love Boat theme song is running through my head right now. Exciting and new. Anyway.
This is the right dance for that.
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, that's how my month went. Like I said, I have no idea how many words I wrote this month. I just know that I was writing, and that I figured out a direction, and I am really, really excited about where I'm currently going. How about you?
Yeah, I had a very good month as well. I did something that I think you're going to be surprised to hear this.
Oh.
Our listeners don't really know my writing habits as well. I think that's something we're going to talk about in a future episode, is our writing habits. But I did something that I don't normally do. I actually hopped around between a couple different stories. That I never do that.
No.
Normally, I have one story, I work on it, and I work on it, and I work on it until it's done, whether that's a short story or a longer form novel or whatever. So hopping around was not normal for me, but I think because of the fact that I had taken kind of a hiatus from writing, not intentionally so, but just because my attention had been elsewhere with other things going on in my life and, so on, I had stepped away for a little bit, and coming back, I kind of came back shortly before NaNoWriMo started. So I had these ideas that I had wanted to explore, that I had wanted to work on, and I just hadn't done it because I hadn't been sitting down and getting myself in front of the computer to write. So I actually hopped back and forth between 3 different projects this month, or last month.
3?
Yeah, 3.
Shoot, that's like the amount of books I read at once.
Yeah, I know. I'm aware. But yeah, I did not write much this month. I was focusing, because I am a plotter, I was focusing on outlining 2 different novels and doing character studies for 2 different novels. I do character sketches before I start writing them, so I was doing character sketches for characters. The 2 new novels that I was working on, out of the 3 projects, 2 of them were new novels, and one was my first novel. I was doing some editing on it. But the 2 new ones, one of them is the sequel to my first novel, which I'll talk about in just a minute. So one of them was the sequel to that. So I was doing some character sketches, and I was outlining, because I already know the major plot beats for that. I already know kind of the subplots that are going on, but I hadn't actually sat down and outlined it. So I was working on outlining the sequel to my superhero sci-fi novel. And then I was actually also outlining and doing character sketches for my second series that I had in mind, which is kind of a horror series. It's centered around the idea of the 4 horsemen actually trying to stop the apocalypse. So that's kind of the concept for that one. So I was doing, it's my first ever horror title, so it was kind of fun working on that. And I really like my characters for that, and those character sketches really made me, the loose, nascent ideas I had of those characters, I like them more now because they're more tangible to me after doing some outlining and some character sketches. And you were about to make a comment, and
I was, but I decided to stretch instead.
Okay. So should I continue, or do you want to make your comment now?
Go for it.
The other thing that I was working on is I actually had some ideas for my first novel, which I'm getting ready to start submitting to agents. I'm trying to do that in the next couple months here. In the process of NaNoWriMo, I got some ideas of ways to kind of change my villain's motivation. Well, as a plotter, that meant going back to my outline and seeing what that affected and everything. And fortunately, it didn't affect that much, but I did have to rewrite several of the scenes where that really focused on my antagonist.
Right.
So NaNoWriMo, I also did some rewriting, and I actually came up with some things that I really liked, some really cool things. So overall, it was a really good month for me. I mean, it wasn't nearly as focused a month as I normally have when I'm writing, but I feel like I accomplished a lot. And actually, later on in the episode, we'll talk about something that I want to do related to that for our listeners that I hope proves helpful to them. But we'll come back to that later.
So, thoughts from you on this before we get into the what's next portion of this. I don't know if we ever told our listeners what we write, like where we fall in regards to writing and such. So you made reference to sci-fi, horror, that kind of stuff. Is that the only thing you write?
I'm a speculative fiction guy. I am primarily science fiction. I have 3 series in mind that I want to write, and a spinoff to one of them. One of them is very much, actually 4. But one of those is
here. J. George. 4.
4, yes. So my main series is, and I kind of made reference to this in our first episode, but it is it was the second episode. This
is just a throwback episode.
Yeah, this is a throwback episode, but it's a 6 novel superhero series. Then I have the horror series that I talked about. I have another one-off science fiction story. It's kind of an outer space science fiction story that I have an idea for that I think is a really cool idea, but I haven't really started working on it other than writing 1 or 2 short stories set in that world. And then I have another one that is science fiction, but it is heavily based on Buddhism.
Nice.
Some kind of Buddhist philosophies inspiring this science fiction world that I want to create. So those are the 4 that I have right now, and then there are spin-offs and so on that I have in mind. But since I've only written actually 1 novel at this point, I don't want to get myself too into the weeds with all that.
It's just the ideas. The ideas are just there.
Yes, but speculative fiction.
Nice.
Always speculative. Like, realistic fiction just is not my bailiwick? Yeah, let's call it my bailiwick. Whoa.
Words.
Come on. We're writers. Our readers are writers and listeners. We've
I
got to be
know,
able to
I know.
use...
I'm excited about words. I'm just saying. Whoa, words.
Anyway, I'm not a realistic fiction kind of guy.
Yes, I write some realistic stuff. That's kind of where I found myself in college, was writing realistic fiction, very minimalist type of stuff. I trust my readers to know a lot, so I tend to write more realistic stuff, or when it comes to my realistic stuff, that's more what it falls under. And then I also am currently dabbling in the utopian idea. There's so much dystopia out there that why not put a little utopia out there?
Yes.
So that's been my big project over the past, I don't know, months-ish. Months-is.
Yeah.
And then when I need a little bit of a breather from that, then I jump back into the real world and real world it up for a bit. So I span both areas. I've got stuff that I'm editing in both worlds. The realistic one is a little more complete than the utopia, but the utopia also involves a lot more building. I have to explain more. So.
And that's kind of what I love about the speculative fiction, building worlds.
Yeah.
I love building worlds. I love coming up with the systems that would exist in a world that's different from ours, or in a future that, even if it's a future based on ours, that's the really cool thing about speculative fiction for me, is the world building part. So.
Yeah, which is something that I also enjoy. It just takes me a while to do it. And I think that comes down to a little bit of the pantser plotter thing.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, and we're really getting off topic here, but when I build a world, I put my characters in the middle of it, and then I just let them run around, and if they all of a sudden discover something, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, but shoot, now I gotta go back and put it all the way through, whereas...
Not shockingly, my process is very different. I will sit down and I'll think, okay, so... if there's a doctor who has to be able to treat superheroes, what kind of equipment would he have? And then that gets me thinking about what kind of protection system would a bank need to protect against people who can walk through walls? It's those kind of things, and then I start planning out, okay, so you would have to have companies to do that. So I need to build this corporation, and I need to build this. So that's, and I plot all of that out, and then... you know, it's all backstory that never shows up in my novel, but I know it's there, so when my characters are acting in that world, I know that there's things that they would do and they wouldn't do, even if it's not on the paper. It's all been plotted out. I have notes on it. I have bookmarks on my computer, and...
that's just incredible to me.
And that's what I love. I love doing that.
The level of detail in that is incredible.
I love doing that.
I drew a picture once.
I will say this. As much as I am a plotter, when I have those pantser moments of discovery, it is really cool. So there is something to your approach to writing. I will give credit where it's due.
And there's absolutely 100% something to your approach in writing as well, because you would fly by me in a race. We'll have to get that image put together with the plotter line and the pantser line, because I think that yes. Yeah, we'll
get it on our website.
We'll show you later.
Websites.
Yes.
Yeah, and website.
We'll show you later.
Yes.
So, that said, now that you have gotten a little bit of a glimpse into our writing and how our NaNoWriMo went, now what?
Yeah.
Now that you don't have this month going, right.
Now that you don't have 1 million people on social media posting about their word counts and posting about their successes and their obstacles and so on, how do you maintain the momentum?
So, that's what we're going to get into now. Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have emphasized in all of our conversations about NaNoWriMo is that it is an individual thing. Your habits are going to be different from mine. I think that's very clear in our conversations about what we did with this month and our writing styles in general. I think one major thing is maybe this was your first time ever writing a novel. Maybe it was your 60th. Maybe you already know what works for you in terms of writing times, in terms of writing habits. But if you discovered something new in this month, if you are new to this, pay attention to what worked for you and embrace those things. Double down on them. If you are a morning writer, as much as you can rearrange your schedule to write in the morning, keep at it. Don't stop doing it just because you made special accommodations for NaNoWriMo. Figure out ways that in your getting back to your normal life, so to speak, you can maintain those kind of habits, whether it's writing in the morning or whether you know that you need to go take a walk when you hit a sticking point, when you hit writer's block.
Right.
Whatever good habits you discovered this month, double down on them. Emphasize them.
Absolutely. I think it's so important to be able to see yourself as a writer, because once you see yourself as a writer, you can see what works and what doesn't. If getting stuff on the page is the thing that is gonna get you going, and then the next time you write you go back and edit that page, and then the next time you write you get stuff on the page and then you go back. If that is your process and if that gets your story out there, then do that.
Yes.
There are great pieces of advice out there from other writers and from endless books on how to write and everything, and some of that advice is fantastic, and you're going to take it and it's going to click and you're going to be like, yes, I need to commit to 500 words a day.
Yeah.
If that's your process and if that's going to do it for you, then do it. But if 500 words is just a burden for you, find the thing that will get you writing and keep you writing.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree, and I would also add, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but the advice that would work for you may not work for anybody else. You might think that a certain piece of advice, 500 words a day, is just ridiculous nonsense, but that taking a warm bath before you sit down to write is the greatest thing that could ever happen to your process. It's going to vary. Look at the articles, look at the tips out there. We're not going to try to offer them up because they're easy to find. They're everywhere. But embrace the ones that work for you, and if it doesn't, just move on.
Yeah, just move on. Don't feel inferior because you can't get that number of words or you can't write for 2 hours at a time. It's not about that. It's about you writing. Whatever that means. If you need to be outside, then go outside. Unless it's cold or dangerous, then don't.
Yeah.
If you need to handwrite everything first, do it. I'm a handwriter. I love to write by hand. If you can't hold a pen, then just get on your computer. There's nothing saying what you have to do to be a writer. There's nothing saying it.
And I would also add to that we have already said don't worry about your word count necessarily. Don't worry about getting distracted. Sometimes the best ideas come from distractions. Some of my best writing ideas have come from me going online to look up one thing, spending 20 minutes on Twitter, spending another 15 reading an article about something completely unrelated, but it inspired an idea, and it's all because I went out there to do that one Google search and I got distracted, and then I got a great idea from it. Don't worry if you're not hitting, unless you have deadlines from a publisher.
That's different.
That's a different matter.
Yeah,
but
hit your deadlines.
Yes, hit your deadlines. But if you're writing for the joy of writing, don't get down on yourself over distractions.
Right. Agreed. Because they happen.
Yes.
There's a ton of them. And that's something that we're going to do in the future is a distraction episode.
Yes.
Where we go into what ours are and how we overcome them.
Yes.
I think the other thing that's really important is if you've gotten to a point over the past month where you have an idea, you feel good about it, but you want some feedback. Find your feedback person.
Yes.
Or persons.
And I'm going to slightly disagree with you there, just a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Even if you aren't at the point where you're ready for feedback, find your feedback person.
This is true, yes. You can, your feedback person can come at any time during the process, but find your feedback person.
Yes.
Find another writer who you trust with your work. Find a friend who's actually going to be honest with you.
Yes.
Find that person because as much as we are writers and we believe that everything in our heads is the way that the world should be and the way that our characters should act, people who are going to give you positive criticism, criticism that matters, things that are good for your writing are only going to inform how you go forward.
I'm going to give a very tangible example of this. I had a scene in my first novel where a character had basically been knocked off a cliff. He was falling to his death. There was nothing he could do to save himself at that point, and the scene was all in his head. But it was one of those where that was my opening scene of the novel. So I had started in the middle of the action, a scene that was going to come near the end of the novel, but I was starting there. 9 out of 10 people who read that scene thought he had jumped off the cliff.
Ouch.
It was a blind spot that I did not have because I knew that it was a scene later in the novel. I did not pick up on the fact because I had context around it that he had been knocked off the cliff. 9 out of 10 people thought he had jumped off and that he was attempting suicide.
Wow.
And I just didn't see it at all because, again, I knew where it fit later in the novel. If I hadn't put that scene in front of people, I would have been sending out a novel to agents and editors with an excerpt that people would have thought that my main character was suicidal.
Which is a trait that would be very different than what
It
your main character
absolutely
is.
not at all my main character.
Right.
He is not even close to somebody who would ever consider doing that.
Yeah, right. And I think that kind of brings me to another thought with finding your feedback person. Having conversations about your novel is good. Giving people the layout, practicing talking about it, practicing saying, I'm writing about this. It helps you focus because I've written things before and people have been like, oh, what's your novel about? And I'll start explaining it to them. And there's a point where you can see someone glass over. And you're like, shoot, it's too long. I have to narrow it down. I have to get to the point faster. And by talking about it, it's only going to help you pitch to agents, pitch to publishers, pitch to people, get them interested. You can be as passionate as you want, but if you use too many words in your description, it's going to fall apart.
Yeah, and these professionals in the industry, they're busy people. If you can't get to the point and sell them fast enough, they're probably going to move on to somebody else who can.
So use your feedback person for that. Use your feedback person, to get some opinions on writing. Use them to practice your pitches with, whatever you need to do. But I think, especially after binging on writing for a month, if that's what you did, getting feedback now is a positive step in your process.
And I'm going to make 2 comments in response to that, 2 additional. And actually, I just thought of something else with my feedback person that I'm going to mention as well. Let's do that first.
Yeah.
That same scene, it was like 1 page from that scene later in the book, and then it cut back to the beginning where it was my main character basically sitting in a diner.
Yeah.
Just like I said, 9 out of 10 people thought that my main character had jumped to his death. 9 out of 10 people also said, start in the diner. It was a more powerful way to start the novel. It was more interesting. It made them feel more connected to the character. So if I hadn't put that in front of people, I never would have gained that feedback. The starting with the cliff scene made so much more sense in my mind, but it wasn't received the way that I wanted my work to be received by any of the readers.
Yep.
I met those readers. I met several of those people, not all of my feedback people, but I met several of my feedback people on Twitter. And I would say, if you were interacting with people on social media, especially other writers on social media during NaNoWriMo, if you found people that you trust and that you like and whose opinions you respect, maintain those relationships. Maybe you're not ready for them to be your feedback partners now, but if they're aspiring writers too, those are going to be the people that you might be moving up in the industry with. You might become great friends with somebody, and then you could recommend agents to one another. You could recommend publishers. You could recommend one another's work. Yes, there's a self-serving component to that, but having those relationships, maybe that's the person who will give you a great idea for a story, or you could really give them a great idea for a story. maintain those relationships because they are incredibly valuable. If you form them, if you were talking about people, if you respect them, if you trust them, maybe you aren't at the point where you're ready to share your work with them now for whatever reason, because your work isn't ready or because you don't know them well enough, maintain those relationships. Those could be incredibly valuable.
Writing is incredibly individual, but it also needs to get collaborative at some point, and that's what these people should do for you. They should be a voice that says, oh, kind of to Jay's point, like, it's, well, maybe you should start in the diner. And then that's on him to go back and say, maybe I should start in the diner. Maybe I really need this cliff scene, but I need to redo it. So ultimately, the feedback that you get back is for you to interpret in the way that you need to interpret. But you have to look at it open and honest and
to give that some context to exactly what you said, what I did do is I ended up cutting the diner scene, but I tweaked cutting the cliff scene.
Not the diner.
Cutting the cliff scene, excuse me. I cut the cliff scene, but I ended up tweaking the diner scene so I could have a little bit more of what in my mind was a more hooking opening, an opening that I thought would be a little bit more gripping.
You are the writer. You get to make those choices, but hearing how people are interpreting your work is important. Because if they're not interpreting the way you mean, then maybe you're missing the mark in your writing. Yeah. Or maybe just what your perception is different than the average reader. And it's just not hitting the way that it's hitting to you. Because that's certainly what was happening to me. For sure. Yeah. And then I think probably the biggest thing with the next month, keep writing. Keep doing what you're doing. Yes. We kind of touched on this with, maintain your good habits. Yeah. Just keep writing. Just keep writing. Whatever form that takes. I am hearing the Dory song. Thank you. That's exactly what I was hearing in my head. Yes. Just keep writing. Just keep writing. That's what was going through my head. Yeah. But like I said, we kind of hit on that with the good habits, but just keep writing no matter what, whatever form that takes for you, whether you're outlining, whether you're editing, whether you're doing character studies or settings, or you just want to plop your character into a weird situation and see how they react. If you're a pantser, go for it. Go for it. Just keep writing. Keep writing. And know that you've got two cheerleaders here cheering you on in your writing. And we will gladly interact if you want to bounce. Seriously, if you want to bounce ideas off us on social media, please do. I would love that. Trampolini. Yes. Yes. I am a trampoline and a cheerleader right now. That's what you called us, cheerleaders. Yep, you called us a trampoline. Yep. This is odd. I am a very bouncy cheerleader. There you go. Anyway, moving on. But keep writing, keep pushing, keep plugging, keep doing what you're doing. Keep plugging, especially that. I know we will. Yep. So speaking of plugs, so I am actually going to be posting some things on my site, jageorgewriting.com, and, we talked about what we write earlier. You can find our writing at jageorgewriting.com or samanthethewriter.com, but I am actually going to be posting a couple things that I hope prove helpful to people. I am going to be publishing an excerpt from my first novel, the one that I am about to be getting out in front of agents and editors and so on. Might that be the one with the diner? It will, in fact, be the one with the diner. So I'm going to have the opening of that novel posted on my website. I am also going to post something that I created during NaNoWriMo. I'm going to post some of the character sketches that I did. I haven't decided exactly what's going to be up. I'll make that decision before this episode actually goes live. Good call. Spoiler, we're recording this in advance, but I will, Spoiler, NaNoWriMo was still very successful for both of us. Yes. But I'm going to be posting at least one character sketch and at least one chapter outline that I did from my writing process. Maybe, especially if you're a pantser, those are probably not going to be terribly helpful for you, but
for those of you who haven't done quite as much writing, maybe that will be helpful for you, and that's the spirit in which I am posting these, in the hopes that they prove helpful, instructive, inspiring, whatever, or maybe give you some new ideas. And also, if you want to discuss process or anything like that, I would be more than happy to discuss the plotting process, the outlining process with anybody who wants to reach out to me at J.A. George Writing or at Plugs Podcast on Twitter. I'm not really on Facebook, so
I am.
Twitter or email are the best ways to reach me.
Yeah, and if you want to talk pantsing of the writing variety, I'm also available. You can find me on Instagram, Samantha the Writer, where I also post our Shameless Plug stuff at the moment, and then Shameless Plugs Podcast on Facebook. And I may do something similar to what you're doing. We'll see.
Okay.
I'm a pantser. I'm not sure what I'm doing every day.
I'm a plotter.
Yep. So, that said, do we have anything else?
I don't think we have anything else except to say one more time, congratulations.
Yes.
Please keep writing, and good luck with everything that you're doing going forward on the writing front. Please reach out to us. We would love to have discussions, conversations, bounce feedback, bounce ideas, whatever you like. And we are the greatest writers who have ever lived.
Yeah, there's that too.
Relentless self-promotion!
Relentless!
Peace out, outlets.
See ya!